So these are the life lessons I have learned so far from boxing as I've been training for my first amateur fight. Now these lessons I've learned from boxing are so applicable to everyday life, and I honestly think that's why boxing can really change someone's life, because the sport itself teaches you so much about who you are as a person. It also forces you to change yourself in order to become good at it, right? So to start off, man, one of the life lessons I've learned from boxing is that nobody gives a fuck about your excuse. Nobody gives a shit. The thing about boxing is that you're going to come to the point where you're going to be sparring and there's going to be times where shit just fucking sucks. And here's the thing, man. Your opponent doesn't give a fuck if you didn't get enough sleep. You feel a little bit sore. You're about to throw up. You're about to shit yourself. Your opponent doesn't give a shit. Your opponent wants to fucking knock you out. So boxing forces you to realize that it doesn't matter that you're tired, man, because your opponent is still going to try to fuck you up. And that principle is so applicable to life, man, because it's just like, in reality, nobody gives a fuck about your excuse either. People only give a fuck about your results, man. I'm telling you, you could have the best excuse in the world possible on why you can't hit your goal. People may give you fake pity, but at the end of the day, nobody gives a shit. And it's the same thing in boxing. Nobody gives a shit if you're tired, you're feeling sore, you're not feeling the best, because your opponent is still going to try to fuck you up. The same way, life is still going to try to fuck you up. So it just kind of changes your mentality that things may not be going in my favor. However, what can I do in this situation to change it, man? And that kind of mentality and that lesson in itself will get you through a lot of hurdles in life, man. Understanding the fact that nobody gives a shit about your excuse. The second life lesson I've learned from boxing is that how you do anything is how you do everything. Now, when you're shadow boxing, for example, the repetitions count. That's what I'm starting to realize as I've been training, man. A lot of people want to hit mitts. A lot of people want to hit the bag. Honestly, when I hit a plateau, the one thing that actually got me over that hurdle was just shadow boxing more often, right? Because shadow boxing is how you're actually going to fight. When you're shadow boxing, you'll understand right away that if you're throwing your punches in a way where you're going to be off balance, because you're going to be punching the air and you're going to completely miss. Also, when you're shadow boxing, all the habits you're doing when you're shadow boxing will carry on to when you're actually sparring. So if you always have your hands down when you're shadow boxing, for example, it's going to occur when you're actually sparring or in the actual fight. So that life lesson in itself is so applicable to everyday life, man, because when I started realizing, the way how you do anything is how you do everything, I started changing a whole bunch of shit in my life. I want to be an organized person, but how you do anything is how you do everything. So in order to be an organized person, I gotta have everything else in my life organized. So I'll make sure my car is clean. I'll try my best to make sure my room's clean. I'll try to have all my gear when I bring it to the gym organized. That kind of stuff translates to other areas in your life being organized, right? You can't just be organized in one area and feel like your entire life is going to be organized too, right? The third lesson I've learned from boxing is that when you are at your worst, that's when the shit actually counts. Now in boxing, anybody can look good, man. When they got fresh legs, they're not tired, they're hydrated. But when it comes to later rounds, man, you're going to be extremely fatigued. And those later rounds could determine whether or not you win the fight. This life lesson in itself, right, is really important because there are going to be a lot of days, man, where you're working towards your goal and shit is just going fucking wrong, man. And it's like, what type of person are you when everything is fucking going wrong, man? When everything is going wrong, are you the type of person that is just going to fucking throw shit away, fuck it all up, self-sabotage? Or are you going to be that motherfucker that be like, all right, shit's not going my way. I'm going to do the best I can within my control and still try to make shit happen, right? It's two different avenues you can take. A lot of people will take that first avenue of just, for example, when it comes to dieting, a lot of people think, oh, I cheated on my diet a little bit, let me just cheat the rest of the day. No. You cheated a little bit, all right? You can still continue your diet after. You can start a diet halfway through a bag of chips. Just throw the bag of chips away, right? Who you are at your worst really determines whether or not you will be able to actually hit your goal, man. Because there's a lot of times, man, where shit is going to go fucking wrong. You cannot expect that you are going to achieve big shit in this world and everything is just going to go fucking smooth. There's going to be a bunch of shit that goes wrong. And you got to be prepared to handle that and be cool with shit not going all the way you would like it to go. You need to be cool with shit not going 100% the way you envisioned it. And you need to be able to adapt to the situation and figure out what you can do when the shit is not going your way. If you are able to do that, man, then on the days where things are going right, you are going to absolutely kill those days. And at the same time, too, when shit is not going your way, you're still able to manage. And then at that point, if you combine that with consistency, what's stopping you from hitting your goal? Pretty much nothing. All right? Finally, man, to wrap this video up, another life lesson I learned from boxing is that our fears are not as bad as our mind envisions. When I first started off boxing, man, it wasn't necessarily that I was afraid to get punched necessarily, but yo, when I would first started sparring, I would flinch a whole bunch, or I'd put my hand up, I'd close my eyes when people were throwing punches at me, because I don't know, it just, I guess what it is I feel a little bit of embarrassment when you get punched in the face. It's fucking normal. It's a normal human reaction, right? But from boxing, I have learned that our fears are not as bad as we make them out in our mind to be. Because there's oftentimes now, I've been training for a little bit now, there's oftentimes when I go to sparring sessions and I'm feeling a little bit nervous, I won't lie. Sometimes I'll just be like, fuck, man, I don't want to spar today. But then as soon as I start sparring and I get into the flow and everything, I'm perfectly fine again. It's just our mind always makes the fears bigger than what they actually are. A lot of people can relate to this in other avenues. For example, I know a lot of motherfuckers that are afraid to go and approach and talk to women because they think the worst possible scenario is going to happen. They think a woman's going to straight up slap them and say, get the fuck out of here, you ugly monkey. But nah, but seriously though, a lot of guys are afraid to go up and approach women because they just think, oh shit, the worst is going to happen. But anybody who has a set of balls knows that it's really not that bad. The worst that's going to happen is they say no and you keep it pushing. And a lot of the times when you go up and do it anyways, you'll realize it really isn't that bad. It's just your mind makes it way worse than it actually is, man. And that's just with a lot of things in life, man. Our mind makes fears bigger than what they actually are. And that life lesson in itself is super important, because there's going to be a lot of times in life, man, where you are going to come to a situation where you're going to feel a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, feel a little bit of fear. But understand, man, that a lot of the times that's your mind just fucking with you. And going towards the fear and just approaching the shit head on, you'll realize very quickly that it's not as bad as it seems. And when you still do shit when you're afraid, you're building this muscle called courage. Courage is doing shit despite the fact that you are afraid. And if you continue to do shit like that, your courage muscle, just like the discipline muscle, will just increase. So you'll be able to do shit that you fear more often because you're building that muscle up. But it's kind of fucked up, because the only way you can actually build the courage muscle is by doing a whole bunch of shit that you're afraid to do. So one way you can actually build that muscle up is through boxing, man. Because let's be real, a lot of people who don't train, they're afraid to fight people. At the end of the day, fighting is not something that the average human being does every single day. Nobody is getting into fights regularly. So the fact that you are choosing to participate in that, you're building your courage muscle, man. And that will be able to translate into your everyday life. With that being said, man, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Follow me on Instagram at Shook Training. Other than that, I'm going to catch you guys in the next one.